about a year ago, I think Wendy came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to present this at a conference?" And I did, and we had pretty good feedback on it. And it was really the first time I'd put all my ideas and thoughts into one place. And so I'm going to try to share my own personal ideas on how to do this. We got a lot of very experienced people out there that may agree or disagree with some of these techniques, but hopefully some of this will resonate with you. And if you're new to our career field, maybe this is stuff you've never heard before that could prevent you from having a journal article rejected or not doing a good job on a review for an editor. So let's take a look at what I've got here. First, we'll talk about the idea of conducting a review. I'm going to go there first for an academic journal article, kind of saying, what does a good review look like, with the concept of what to do and what not to do, right? Some of my, please don't do this when you reviewed an article. And a lot of that comes from my experience being an associate editor and hoping to get a good review back and seeing some fundamental flaws in those. And then also we'll talk about writing a revise and resubmit document and responding to reviewers. How do you do that with tough reviewers, and how do you get clarity on conflicting comments? You've got one reviewer telling you to do something and another reviewer telling you to do something different, and how do you work through that particular process? So that's where I'm heading. The presentation is really broken into two very distinct parts. So let's take a look at this first idea of reviewing for an academic journal. So what to do? Well, first of all, thoroughly read the article. Now, reflect on the quality of the research and how it's communicated. I like to open up a Word document and take notes as I go. Making notes to myself so that when I sit down to write the review, I've got a list of things that I've seen. And sometimes, honestly, I will read it and then wait a few hours or even the next day and pick it up again and kind of think through and process what I've read in the article, and not try to make a snap decision on the recommendation or the comments that I'm going to make. Did you check the math and the methods? I mean, sometimes you don't have the mathematical ability or the methodological knowledge, and that's okay, but you need to let the associate editor know that. And that's what that box is there for, to tell the editor kind of confidentially, hey, I like this article, I reviewed this part, but I'm really not an expert on this particular method. Or if you are a person that knows this method, hey, I've checked the math, this is a technique that I'm very familiar with. You need to also let the associate editor know that. And sometimes as an AE, I'm frustrated that there's that confidential box that you can give me that information and people leave it blank. I bet about half of the reviews I get back, I don't get any kind of, insight, that's just to me as the associate editor. And I wish people would take that, more advantage of being able to tell me, this is my method or it's not my method, or I know this area really well, or, here's something that I found in the article, or my general impressions of it. And I'm not going to say that to the reviewer, to the authors themselves, but you need to understand this is my candid opinion of this article. That's what that box is for, that almost every journal has. Did you look at the key citations and verify the contribution? A lot of this is about plagiarism. And there have been multiple times through the years that I noticed in a review that I keep seeing that same article cited over and over and over again. And after a point, you start realizing that that's probably the authors. And then you go to that citation and, you go find that article that was already published a year ago, and you realize that it's 3/4 the same as the new manuscript you're looking at. And, obviously that gets into ethical concerns, but it also makes you start asking about the contribution. How is this paper different than the one that you've cited 10 times? In other words, you really have to, at times, as a reviewer, and I'm not saying you need to go look at all 50, citations and 50 papers they reference, but if there's one that seems to be really close to what they're doing and they keep citing it over and over again, go take a look at that. First of all, make sure they're not self-plagiarizing. And number two, ask yourself and the authors, what is that new contribution? If you've just published a paper on this same topic 2 years ago, how is this one different and unique, and what kind of knowledge is it contributing? So I think looking at those key citations when you review is also very important. What flaws do you see and what information is missing? You should be making a list as you read the article. These seem to be the key things that really bother me. And it could be something with the research question. It could be something in how they describe the gap in the literature that they're trying to fill. Or maybe it's something straight with the method that you don't like a statistical technique, or how they did their survey or their qualitative interviews, whatever it is. Again, be keeping track of those flaws that you see. And then also look at the good stuff. So often we train our young professors to be critical, and that's a great habit to have. But then they do what? They trash every paper they see in a review, and they don't provide a lot of positive comments as well. So try to be constructive and understand that the majority of the papers you review are not perfect. No research is perfect, and that part of your job as a reviewer is to be constructive and show them, hey, these are ways that you can improve on, what you're doing in this manuscript and in this research. Don't just look for ways to criticize. Also look for ways to compliment and recommend how to improve that research. Pointing out positive aspects, and I think a lot of this too is how you write your review. Be positive up front, provide them the critical information, then always end real positively. I always write something at the end that says, hey, this is a great area of research. I think you could do good work if you worked on these 2 or 3 things. Even if I'm recommending a rejection, I've tried to provide something in there positive about what they can do to move that research forward. And I know our editors appreciate that, because at times, they are looking for papers to develop that they want to see move forward. They don't want every single thing rejected that they receive. Up front, when I write my review, I always provide 1 to 2 sentence summary of the topic. I think this is professional and very complimentary to those authors, to let them know, yeah, I read it. I know the topic. I see what you're doing here. I like this method that you used. I see this as really a good fit for our readership if you've liked the topic. And then say, hey, I also, got a good general impression about these contributions. Then roll in with but I saw some problems, and here's what I think you still need to work on. So that's where I usually, in the end of that paragraph, say I've got 4 or 5 major concerns, 2 or 3 minor concerns that I think you still need to address as you try to respond to this, or maybe fix it and send it to a different journal if it's being rejected. So I will also provide that minor list. Sometimes that's a secondary list of items and edits that just, this is misspelled, or you forgot to add this citation, or again, and your job is not to rewrite their article. So often I get young reviewers that are just out of their PhD programs, and they send me a 32-page review, and half of it is them editing the English on every page. And while I appreciate you putting all that effort into the review, that's not your job to rewrite the article, okay? If you're doing that much editing, you simply need to provide a comment that says, hey, you need a copy editor. Take this to somebody in the English department, or to a professional editor, and have them help you with the grammar, the punctuation, the spelling. And that is an appropriate review comment to make. It's not your job as a reviewer to fix all their spelling and grammar errors. So again, don't try to rewrite their article for them. Provide a limited set of, hey, here's some things I think you could work on or fix. But again, that doesn't need to be page after page. It's okay to mention your recommendation. Sometimes I will, if I'm really hammering an article hard and I've got 10 major problems with it, I'll say something like, hey, I really can't support publication of this manuscript currently. But rarely do I say that I'm recommending acceptance or rejection, for a couple reasons. Number one, you don't know what the other reviewers are going to say, right? They may see things that you didn't see. So it's really, not good if you say, oh, this needs to be accepted right now, and somebody else finds a major flaw that you didn't see. So you are really don't box in or don't trap the associate editor and editor in by saying, oh, this is the greatest thing. It needs to win the Nobel Prize. We need to accept it right now, right? Try to provide your own recommendation and try to not say whether you're recommending accept or reject. They'll probably figure it out based on the number of comments that you make. And again, you're just trying to not put the associate editor and editor in an awkward position by saying this is a strong reject or strong acceptance in your comments to the author. Definitely provide your frank and critical comments on the side. I might provide a very constructive how to fix the methodology comment to an author, and then on the side tell the associate editor, this is a disaster. There's no way they're going to fix this method. That's not something constructively or professionally that I might say to an author, but I need to give my frank, very critical comments to the editor on, as a professional, this is where I think this piece is right now. And sometimes the other reviewers won't agree with you, and sometimes the editor will overrule you, and that's okay. But again, you need to provide those frank and critical comments in that editor's box in the system on the side. Don't waste everyone's time. Try to be on time and provide good feedback. And this is hard. We all have finals we're grading, and right now it's the 1st of November and everybody's struggling to get reviews and associate editor reports done on time. But do your best to not be 30, 60 days late and not even responding to the journal. I find that if I'm going to be late and I send somebody like Wendy Tate an email and say, hey, Wendy, I'm running behind on this, I need 2 more weeks. They're very respectful of that and will usually give you the additional time. And at least they feel confident that that review's coming and it's going to be good. But when they don't hear from you, those editors and associate editors kind of go into a panic. Hey, I haven't got this review back. It's 60 days overdue. They won't even answer the emails I'm sending them to remind them. And so they start wondering, are you even going to reply? And do I need to find another reviewer? So again, be professional. And if you're going to be late, tell the associate editor or the editor of that journal that, hey, I'm still doing this and I'm still going to reply, but it's going to be a few days or a week or 2. Ask for an extension and be professional about it. What not to do. This is always a fun list, right? Don't write 1 to 2 sentences about how terrible it is and then just turn in your review. It's amazing that after 20 years, I still, as an associate editor, will have a reviewer somewhere that sends me in 3 lines about how much they either like or disliked an article, and they don't provide any justification. If you're saying this is a terrible article, you need to give me 3 or 4 specific reasons and some constructive feedback to the authors on what they did wrong. Okay. Don't say the paper is perfect and publish immediately. Again, don't box in that associate editor and the other reviewers. You just want to provide your assessment and very respectfully understand that you could have missed something, right? And it's always fun for me to see the other reviewers that come out on a paper, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't see that. But the other reviewer, my friend David Canner at Iowa State, he's a smart guy and he saw something that I didn't see when I was reviewing. So just be aware that that's going to happen, right? There's a lot of other smart people reviewing these articles, and you don't want to say a paper is perfect or that it's ready for acceptance. Just provide your comments and let the AE and the editor work out, what's going to happen at that decision time. Don't ask the reviewer to cite your 3 papers. So often I see people say, well, you didn't cite these 3 papers by Jones and Jones and Jones, and it's really quickly obvious that you're Jones and you just want to see your stuff cited, and it's unprofessional and people are going to see it happening. So again, just try to provide them good citations and where to go, but don't do this to try to get your H index up, right? This is not about you. It's about providing good feedback to those authors on that paper. Also, don't try to provide suggestions on a method that you really don't know that well. Be honest. Say, you know what? I'm not really an expert on fill in the blank. I'm not really an expert on qualitative interviews, but I don't really think that this is how that method should work. And just ask a question, is this really how a qualitative interview process should work? Let those reviewers come back to you and say, well, yes, according to these methods and these techniques, this is the correct way. In other words, question them. Don't tell them they're wrong, right? And if you're the expert, the world expert on a method, you can speak a little bit more confidently. But again, don't try to tell them to do something on a method when you're not that world-class expert, right? It's just maybe your second or third method. Don't assume the math is correct, right? Go ahead and check it. Ask questions. Decision science actually has a box that they make you check when you do the review that said, did you check the math or not? And there are times, if it's deep game theory and something I don't understand, that I will say, no, I didn't check the math. You need to have somebody that's an expert on game theory check this. And I'll tell the editor that, and that's okay. We don't expect you to be an expert on every single thing in a paper when you get it. You may be the expert on a topic, or maybe you were picked as a reviewer because you know that particular context or that industry very well. Okay. Again, don't criticize the authors for writing, not writing the paper you wish they would have. So often people came back and say, I really don't like your research question. I wish you would have asked this other one. I really wish you would have went out and solved world hunger and not just looked at food supply chain distribution, right? That's not really appropriate. Look at the research question, right? Look at the contribution based on that research question and try to stay in your lane, and don't ask them to go out and write 2 or 3 more papers that are going to take up 40 or 50 more pages. And I think that'll help you, right? And if you come back and say to yourself, you know what, this was kind of a weak research question and the contribution's not that much, that's an appropriate criticism. But to go out and ask them that, go out and collect, data for 3 different research questions is probably outside the scope of what you should be asking, in my opinion. And there are others that may not agree with that. So what does a good review look like? I'm going to actually pull up a review. I've got about 10 minutes here, so I'm going to, go ahead and I'm dividing this into 2 30-minute sections, right? I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes kind of talking about what I think a good review looks like. And I'm going to use one that I wrote a long time ago and point out some examples. It might even give you some clues on what not to do, right, when you're actually submitting a journal article to a particular journal. So let me go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to try to reshare a review that I did a long time ago is what it says on here. Okay. And I've gone through and taken out, some of the article and topic details to make sure that even though it's been years and years, I don't want anybody to review their particular article. I don't think that'll happen, is what I'm saying. So let me go ahead and share. And hopefully now you can see this was a long time ago, right? As mentioned, I usually start out when I write a review with a 3 or 4 line. The topic of this paper is interesting. I think it needs to be studied further in the literature. I also commend the authors for attempting to collect survey data on this topic. Maybe it's a topic that's really hard to get data on. And so I'm complimenting them and providing some positive feedback up front. And this is where the catch comes, right? However, I have, despite my positive reaction to the topic, I have some major issues that keep me from supporting its publication at this time. And I don't do that all the time, but this is one that I really come down on pretty hard. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, I got way too many major issues here to really get behind this paper. And here's my major, and I number them. I literally go through one at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the things I don't like about your article. This is a classic one that I put in a review. I don't believe there's a single citation to anything published in DSJ. If you're submitting an article to Journal of Supply Chain Management and you're not citing a single thing in the Journal of Supply Chain Management, me as a reviewer, I'm going to jump all over that. You're not positioning your work within the existing body of knowledge of that particular journal, to me, that's a flaw. And so again, this is a relevant topic, but you're not really discussing anything that's been out there. And so I go out and tell them with citations, have you read what Dr. Craighead wrote? Have you looked at what Liu and Zailani and Autry and Melnick have done in this area? And again, in my opinion, you really haven't positioned this in the supply chain literature, and therefore it's difficult to determine if you're even filling a gap in the literature because you haven't told me how this fits in that nomological network of the knowledge we have. Then in the introduction and conclusion, number 2, I found very little argument for the contribution of the research. So in the introduction and the conclusion, if they're not arguing for the contribution of their own work, why should me as a reader or reviewer try to figure out what the contribution is? I personally think that authors should be writing papers and saying, look, our contribution is, at least in the conclusion, if not foreshadowing it in the introduction as well. Tell me, hey, this was our research question. This was the gap that we filled in the literature. And we think here are the 2 or 3 theoretical knowledge contributions that our research provides. And so again, that's another classic response that I might provide in a review. Here's another one. The authors do develop the first hypothesis with adequate discussion and relevant citations, but the conceptual development of the other 2 is just non-existent. You provided me a couple hypotheses and didn't give me a single citation that argues and supports for that hypothesis. And I've seen this a number of times in articles that are submitted. So that's another common review comment that I make. I also look for inconsistent discussion. Remember I said as I'm reading, I'm kind of keeping track. I notice, hey, on page 22, you told me something that doesn't really fit with what you told me 3 pages earlier. Any kind of inconsistencies like that, please point out, right? You're pointing out that, on page 22, you say that there's, overall value of this for early adopters, but then that doesn't really translate with what you tell me again on page 23. And then this is a classic one. New data is presented in the discussion section. That's time for you to talk about the implications, both managerially and theoretically, of what you found in the results, not present us new results and new data. So again, that's a review comment that I will typically come out with. Here's a methods issue that I think that I found, right? They had a couple things going on here where they're trying to talk about early adopter decisions, and then they made it clear that about 63% of their sample didn't even know about the new policy. So how are they making decisions on being early adopters or not when they didn't know about the policy? And then, here's another famous one, right? They go from 227 respondents to 165 in the analysis and don't tell us why. You've got to tell us how N was decided. And if you've narrowed down your sample, you've got to tell us that. So I've got a couple methods things in there as well. Okay. Another one, you've got a whole group of unsupported hypotheses, but there's no discussion of why they weren't supported. So again, I'm looking and numbering major flaws, and hopefully this gives you an idea of some of those major flaws that I'm looking for, right? Here's another classic one, right? You can't propose a formal hypothesis and never talk about it again in the rest of the paper, right? So this was a paper, obviously, that I found 7 or 8 major contributions. And if you've never reviewed a paper before, this is not all about methods. This is about how good is the research question? Is there a literature that fits with our journal? Is there a gap in the knowledge? Yes, there were some methods things, okay? But I also am looking at the end saying, did you support the hypothesis you build? Did you give me results that support those hypotheses? All right, and then at the end, did you show me those contributions? So as a technique though, what do? I always like to end on a positive note. Overall, I think this is a great topic. I hope this new line of research, gets generated. in its current form, this actually looks like something that's more of a practitioner journal piece. You know, half of my comments go away if this is not being sent to an academic journal that's peer reviewed. You know, maybe if you can't do this in an academic journal, maybe you should be thinking about taking this to, you know, again, Harvard Business Review, California Management Review, some other place that's not looking for that rigor. But if you want the rigor that an academic journal article needs, then I need to see you respond to these 7 things. Now, what's nice about numbering them is that if the associate editor and the editor decide to not agree with me, and they decide to give this an R&R, and it comes back to me again, and maybe it's 6 months from now, I may not even remember what I wrote 6 months ago when I get it back the second time, but I'm going to be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's the problem I have, and do you respond to it if it comes back to me again? So I've told them, if you're going to come back, you're going to try to get this into a premier journal like JSCM or DSJ, then I need to see these 7 things answered. So I leave kind of a clear path for those authors that, no, these are the 7 things you need to respond to if you've got a chance to move forward. Now, or at least if they get a rejection, they know exactly why after reading these 7 bullet points. I'm gonna stop there for a second before I go into writing response documents. Questions from the crowd. Surely there's 60-something people out there, right? There's got to be somebody that has a question. And while I do that, I'll go back to my PowerPoint. That'll give me a chance to switch over to my other documents. Any questions? All right, and again, this is John Bell's kind of approach to doing responses and things that I've tried to learn. And again, your other colleagues and experts at doing this, may agree or disagree, but at least this gives you a baseline of how I do it. Well, how about an R&R document? I'm still stunned how many times as an associate editor, I get a manuscript back in the second round and they say, here's our new revised document, and I'm looking for the response document and there isn't one. They'll send me an email or put a comment in there that says, thanks for your reviews, we've improved our manuscript, here it is. It makes it really hard on the editors and the reviewers when they get it a second time, right? And hopefully all of you have learned somewhere from your mentors or somewhere in your training, getting a doctorate degree, that yes, you need to build a response document that is very clear on how you responded to the comments from the reviewers and the AE and the editor in the previous round. If you're smart, you're going to be really clear to say, this is what you told me. And then again, this is how I'm responding to that. And you will be able to attach that as a supplementary document in that information system for that journal. So I will be able to not only upload the revised manuscript, I've got the ability to upload a supplementary document that will go out to the reviewers and the associate editor saying, this is how I responded and why there are and how there are changes in the new document that I'm submitting. You want to professionally respond to each comment received from the editor. I have an approach where I'm very complimentary and very grateful and thankful to reviewers and AEs for the comments they've given me. I don't argue. That is just not my approach. I've seen some full professors out there with very big titles behind their names that will basically tell reviewers that they're idiots. I'm personally not at that point in my career and have never been that brave to go out and be that argumentative author. I would recommend to those that are assistants and associates and or even to my colleagues that are fulls that it's a much smarter and less stressful process to be positive and professional and agree and thank the reviewers for those comments and not be super argumentative with them. Also pay close attention to any points by the editor. I've seen people respond to articles and not really respond to the editor or the AE and just dig right into what the reviewers do. It is very appropriate to respond to the editor's email and say, thank you for pointing to those 1 or 2 things we need to fix, and here's how we did it. Or to an AE, thank you for summarizing what the reviewers did and pointing out the 3 most important things, and respond to that AE on the comments that they make in their own summary of the reviews. Also look for that associate editor to prioritize the different opinions. A good AE will tell you which comments in the review to focus on and which ones to ignore. It's not uncommon for a reviewer 1 to say, I hate this theory, take it out of the paper, and another reviewer to say, I love this theory, you need to give me more. And there you are as an author going, well, which of these 2 reviewers do I respond to? And you can't respond to both of them without getting into conflict. And so what you hope is that the associate editor will say, okay, listen to reviewer 1, you need to remove this theory. Or listen to reviewer 2 and really work on the strength of this particular theory. All right, so again, look for that AE to do that. It could be that the AE will be that primary decision maker, right? Don't argue with that AE and with that editor. They're the ones that are going to kind of, again, lead you to that path, let's hope. All right, use a format that clearly distinguishes your comments and the reviewer's comments from that written response, right? You want to say, here was the section or the paragraph the reviewer wrote. I usually leave it in plain font, and then below that I put in bold or italics, here is my response. I usually start with, thank you very much, that was a great comment. Here is my response to that comment. Use headings to clearly distinguish between what the editor, the AE, and we're going to look at one that I've written not too long ago, and you'll see what I'm talking about, using headings that are bolded that says, this is what the editor's section, this is the AE section, this is my responses to reviewer 1, this is my responses to reviewer 2. So again, don't just respond to the reviewers, have an individual section for those different people that you're responding to. Again, be respectful, be grateful, right? Try to point out that, let people know you're listening and you're trying to improve your article. That doesn't mean you're going to do every single thing they ask for. A lot of times I will respond and say, that's a great comment. Really wish we had time to do that. Our paper's already 40 pages. We've already taken up all we can do. We actually have a project going that's going to be, the follow-on that's going to answer some of those questions that you wanted, or here's the reason why we couldn't do that particular method. And it's not uncommon for a reviewer to say, use this method, and you go out and research it and find it's not appropriate. Now you got to go back to them very politely and say, no, that's really not the right approach, and here's why. And use citations, right? Use the literature to help you make a very polite and respectful rejection of what they're telling you to do. So again, use citations to make your points. Don't argue, be politeful. You don't have to do every single thing they say, but that, telling them they're an idiot and just arguing with them is definitely not the approach that I use. Don't open up new issues. I see a lot of people do this, even at the full professor level. And, my friend Stan Griffiths and I, we publish together a lot, and we talk about this. Stan's up at Michigan State University. Just answer the reviewers. Don't rewrite your whole entire article and change the entire methodology just because somebody asked you a clarifying question. Answer their question and try to keep your paper moving, right? Sometimes you'll actually decide, oh, because of that comment, they don't like my method, I'm going to change my whole method. Now you've opened up Pandora's box, and they're asking you 10 new questions that you shouldn't have even done. And again, I've got a couple co-authors that I have to, remind once in a while. No, let's just answer the question and tell them why this is appropriate, or clarify what we did. Let's not overreact. and change our entire methodology and open up a whole bunch of new issues. If you're not sure, if you've got two reviewers that are telling you conflicting stuff and the AE doesn't help you, sometimes an AE will go, yep, do everything the reviewers tell you. And you're sitting there going, well, I can't. I got two that are not helping me. It is appropriate to send an email to an editor and say, hey, I don't mean to bug you. I'm not being confrontational, but I kind of need some guidance on which way to go. And I've seen this in the last few months in my own department, where several of my very experienced full professors have had to write emails to editors and say, you know what, I kind of need some guidance here. Do you want me to throw this theory out or not? The AE didn't really tell me. I'm not sure which way to go. I've got conflicting stuff. And I think that'll get answered. I think the editors and the AEs will do a good job at that point of giving you some direction on which way to go, and not waste everybody's time with another round of review that eats up 2 or 3 months. I also try to clearly indicate in the response document what I've changed. There's a couple different ways to do that. You could say, hey, we've revised the manuscript to take into account what you've asked us, and that section is now in the second paragraph of page 27. Tell them where it is in the document. So often a response will be a bad response will say something like, yep, we fixed this, thank you. And you're the associate editor or the reviewer going, well, where did you fix it? And now it's like an Easter egg hunt. Now I'm looking through the journal article, the revised one, trying to figure out, did they do what I told them to? Now you're just aggravating the reviewer for no reason. You know, they may not even go over there and spend a lot of time looking. They may just say, nope, they didn't do what I told them. So tell them, guide them, say, look, I fixed this. It's in the second paragraph on page 27. Clearly indicate. Now, another piece of this is sometimes provide an excerpt right in the response document. We have now fixed that paragraph. Here, quote, 3 lines of what's in the revised manuscript. Now, what have you done? Now they don't even have to go look at the revised manuscript. You've showed them right in the response document with a small little excerpt or a quote. This is what we did in the revised manuscript. And you can see we've fixed it the way you wanted us to. Again, make it easy for that reviewer and that associate editor to see that you've listened, you've made the changes, and help them find it. Either show it to them in the response document, or as a minimum, tell them what page and paragraph it's in the revised document. Definitely provide those excerpts. I've mentioned that already. So what does a good response document look like? So let me go ahead and switch over here. I'm going to move over and see if I can actually pull up this is actually a response that, this is one of my own articles, right? This is one that we responded to not too long ago. All right. Let me share this. Bear with me. So I start that response document out just to the review team or to the editor, right? Thank you for the reviews. We've contemplated and really considered your comments. We consider the manuscript much stronger now, thanks to your feedback. You'll find a detailed response to each of your comments in the next few sections. We've reproduced your comments in normal font and numbered them sequentially so that everybody could follow the dialogue, right? In other words, R1.2 is reviewer one's second comment, right? I've created a set of headings and explained that to them so they could follow my response document. Our personal responses are in italics. So you should be able to clearly see this is what you told us, and this is how we responded. And as I mentioned, I start typically with the editor. This is what the editor wrote. Dear authors, an earlier version, was a reject and resubmit. Now we've got 2 reviewers and an AE that have looked at your new manuscript. We think that it's, stronger, but we still got a bunch of issues that need to be addressed. And then I literally respond to that editor. Thank you for your comments. thank you for synthesizing the reviews, right? We've now attempted to be more clear and delineate for the reviewers the bounds of our current research. In other words, I'm responding to those one or two things that is still bothering the editor. Okay. Then I do that for the departmental editor. I think this is a JOM paper that I'm responding on. Specifically, I'm going through, this is department editor, his first comment. They said reviewer 1 has asked for this kind of evidence. And here I am in italics saying, we have now provided that evidence. We've added real world examples per what the reviewers asked for. We've given clarifications as requested. And the reason I'm putting those headings in there is so they can go down and read my response to the reviewer 1 or reviewer 2 that I've given. In other words, I'm making it very easy for the departmental editor to say, yes, I've done what you've asked, and the details for that are down below in my response to reviewer 1. Similarly, I continue, he's pointing out here, reviewer 2 finds the paper insightful. However, right, we got to have some consideration of how drivers are actually operating in this model that I created. I said, look, very positively, we appreciate this comment. While they make a good point, we have purposely chose not to include this recommendation. So I'm out on thin ice here, right? I'm doing something that the DE asked, not doing something they asked, and I'm making an argument for why, very respectfully, why we didn't do that. But what have I done? On pages 37 and 38, though, I put your ideas in my future research. So I'm not ignoring their suggestion. I'm just saying I can't do it at this time in this manuscript, and here's why. And I'm acknowledging that this is a really good idea, department editor, and I see what you're telling me, but I've now added it to my future research section, and I put that in the revised manuscript on pages 37 and 38. So again, I had that same kind of thing for 3. I even got a table. I provide them a table, right? They wanted some more analysis. I showed them right in the response document. Here's that table of the analysis that you want, right? And here's further evidence of the robustness of the simulation model we used. So again, it's not only being put in the revised manuscript, I'm also using some of that to show them what our new analysis looks like right here in the response document. I'm trying to get down here below, right? There's, I thank them again, best wishes, thank you for your guidance. Then what? Here it comes again with highlights and bold documents. Here is my response, right, to reviewer 1 for this revision that I'm sending to JOM. Now, what is this? This is his second review report on this paper, right? And that reviewer is saying, I like the new focus of the manuscript, and I'm positive I don't have a major concern this time, but I have some minor comments I still want you to fix. So we thank them for the summary. We say, hey, we're really delighted you like our paper, but here are the answers to each of your minor comments. And we number them with headings. We provide our response in bold italics. We thank them, right? And again, it's really an art, right? It's an art to respond, provide evidence, be very clear in the response document, and don't open up a whole bunch of new issues, right? Don't get yourself in a situation, well, now the reviewer's asking 10 more questions because you changed a bunch of stuff that they didn't ask you to change. So that's on one side of the balance. On the other side is actually answering, right? You do have to provide, evidence that you've revised the manuscript, you've acknowledged their comment, and you've done what you can to fix that without taking the research and the manuscript down a direction now that doesn't make any sense, right? So there's a real balance between giving them their answer and not messing up your paper, right? You've got to find that balance. So again, here are different examples. We thank you for the suggestion. Here's an excerpt. Here's the passage that now appears in the manuscript on pages 37 and 38. We felt this was so important that we didn't just say, go look on page 37. we're showing them right in the response document how we rewrote that section, and how we're now specifically responding to what they wanted. Sometimes I actually say, you know what, we've actually now put that in a table or in an appendix for you. Again, telling them where it is in the revised manuscript. Now, something that I like to do that I haven't talked about that I've been kind of picking up from other authors is in the revised manuscript, sometimes I'll also highlight it or put it in bold that here's the piece we fixed, rather than making them search for that, making it jump off the page, right? Because you can always change the font after it's accepted. But in that revision piece, I kind of like this as an AE. It's really nice for my eyes when I know they changed something on page 37 and I open up the revised document and boom, there it is in bold, or there it is with yellow highlight. My eyes can jump right to it and they go, yep, they did a good job responding to the comment and they fixed it right here in the revised document. So I hope what you see is I'm describing a process that's very transparent, that leads that reviewer and that AE team very quickly to the fact that, yes, they've done what we asked and it's clear. It's here in the response document, but it's also been documented in that particular manuscript. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down for now. We won't belabor my particular response. I've got about 10 minutes left for questions, I believe. Let me actually go back to my PowerPoint, make sure that I didn't miss anything in the actual PowerPoint. Yeah, so being a good reviewer will earn you respect in your field. So many of the full professors that are out there at our schools in their past have won top reviewer awards. Many of the AEs we have were picked because they were such good reviewers. Many of the editors we have became the best AEs and won AE awards for many years, right? I think Wendy Tate probably has a whole box of trophies for being a top reviewer and a top AE at journals, right? For years, she developed that skill and built her reputation in the field. And now she's an editor at one of our top journals, right? So this doesn't just happen overnight. This being a good reviewer and a good associate editor leads you to higher levels of being an editor down the road in the future. Putting effort into reviewing will result in learning how to publish, right? What did you see in those review documents? You see the errors that other people are making. Hopefully when I was showing you that review that I did and I was destroying that guy's article, you were thinking to yourself, yeah, I don't need to make that mistake when I publish. So there's a lot of learning here for assistant and associate professors that are still developing their own skills, or for any of us, right? I learn stuff every day by doing reviews and looking at the mistakes that other people make and thinking to myself, wow, I need to make sure I don't make that same mistake when I do my research and put an article forward. A good response document allows you to thoughtfully determine how to improve your manuscript. It's painful. I mean, there's always some reviewer that hates your paper and it's hard to read. But when you get a paper accepted, you look back and you say to yourself, you know what? The review process made it better. And you got to tell yourself that, right? That I'm writing this response document and it's painful and it's a struggle to answer this person that's really negative about my paper, but I'm thoughtfully figuring out how to improve my paper. And it will. You will look back after 3 or 4 rounds of going through JSCM's process and realize that what I submitted and what I actually published are much different. And this paper that was published is much better because the reviewers, the associate editor, and the editor helped me take it to a new place. And so that's hard to see when you get that review back the first time, right? It's just painful. But again, you've got to understand the developmental part of doing these response documents and improving your manuscript. And I think be respectful, be concise, right? Try to avoid conflict, answer their questions, and don't open up new problems. You know, maybe someday you'll be that person that is the Nobel Prize winner and you can tell all the reviewers they don't know what they're talking about and they'll listen to you. For the other 99% of us mortal humans, right? We have to be respectful and work with reviewers, right? We're going to have a hard time, you know, dismissing their feedback. So I definitely think that positive approach and an open approach is a way to go. So I'm going to kind of open it up for questions there. I got about 10 minutes. Wendy, was this what you were looking for?
I'm glad you called me out, John, because I was just ready to jump into the conversation anyway. So I think that was absolutely wonderful. And the thing I'd like to maybe spend a minute or two talking about is, and I think this is what, when I come and ask somebody about reviewing, the reason I come to you is that you take the emotion out of both the being a reviewer and also responding to reviewers. And so I think even for me personally, that is very, very challenging. So, how do you set those sometimes mean comments to the side and really address those in a way that will be received better?
Yeah, it definitely tests your emotional maturity, doesn't it? You have to sometimes set these things aside for a few days. Don't have a knee jerk reaction and start writing a very negative response, right? Stop, think about how you can positively reply to that. Think about a respectful way to go. I actually was on a review team not too long ago where 3 of my co-authors got together and decided that this reviewer was an idiot and they were going to tell him that. And right before they pushed send, they sent it to me as the 4th author. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? We can't do this. We've got to stop, take the emotion out of this. 90% of what you're saying is correct, but we got to figure out a way to frame this in a respectful manner, or that reviewer's just going to dig in and fight with us.
Yeah.
And again, it's difficult. I think for younger folks, before you really send back a negative response, check with your mentors, check with your dissertation chair. Find that colleague down the hallway and say, is this an appropriate way to respond? Because we don't agree with this review comment, and we think this person doesn't know what they're talking about. We think this is how to respond. And there's people out there, a lot of them are on this call, right? There's a lot of full professors on this call that can help you not make a critical error in responding emotionally.
Yeah.
Good comment.
So what about what if you got a paper that you really hated?
If you're reviewing?
Yeah, you're reviewing.
If I really hate a paper, I try to be professional and constructive in the review, and then I just vent on the editor in that little side box. I might literally say, Mark and Wendy, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, and here's why. I'm going to back myself up. They've just, ignored 20 years of operations management history. They're going against everything we stand for, and here's why. They have no citations to support what they're doing. This is not how to do this method according to, Glaser and Strauss, if it's an interview, right? Use those main citations and say, this is why. But again, I usually give those super strong opinions to the editor in the little editor box. I tell you what, when I'm not sure what to do with an article and I'm on the fence and I could go either way, I also let the editor know that in the box. Hey, I'm recommending reject, but this was 50-50. I could have went either way. If you and the other reviewers want to go with a major revision, I'm happy to look at this again. So again, I'm trying to give that editor as much information as I can without being unprofessional to the authors.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's super interesting. And Mark and Ting, I'd actually like to hear sort of your response to what John just presented and what he said. As editors, do you appreciate getting those comments in that editor box, or what?
Ting, let me go first because I'm sorry, John, I wasn't paying full attention to you because I'm simultaneously reading a review, and the review says in the comments to me the main problem with this paper is that it's pointless. Clearly, a reviewer who was thrilled with the paper. But really importantly, the first sentence to the author is that, I appreciate all the work that went into this research and that, you're attempting to answer an interesting question, right? And so, that idea that being clear to the editor what you really thought is useful. The one thing I would add to that is that it's a fine line between telling me you think the paper is pointless and being so nice to the authors that you don't tell them that you rejected their paper, right? Because that does happen on occasion as well, where the reviewer goes overboard being nice with the paper they hate, and the authors don't get the message. So but I think backing up further, Wendy, you talked about taking the emotion out of the process. I think from the standpoint of the editors, that makes life a whole lot easier. And I think as an author, you have to find a way to do that as well. Sorry, Ting Ting, I had to share. I mean, how often do you get to read something like that?
Yeah, I just want to echo that, like, in terms of, I appreciate the AE, the reviewers, they tell us what they feel. It's like they're feeling about the paper, something that it's maybe too strong to tell the authors, because that also give me some information about where to go. But yeah, it's like Mark just said, sometimes when the difference is too big, like the overall the review letter is too good, and then so it almost reads like they love the paper, and then they said, no, this paper is like, and sometimes it might just give the author some like a misunderstanding. So they're thinking like, oh, it's because the editor don't like the paper, because all reviewers said our paper was great. It's kind of a little bit awkward. Just to add upon like how, like, John, I really like how you just put everything together and then show step by step, like how you make all the reference very clear. Like, so for the reviewers, for the editors, they know where to look for things. That's a very, very, very important, because it's really, think about like a 20-page response document plus the revision, the revised manuscript plus like all the previous reviews, right? So it's a lot of reading for the editor, for the AE, to figure out where things are and how, like, where are the things. So that referencing, no matter what type of format, so it's a table or it's a list, where you maybe highlight the bold different color, as long as readability is good, like it's easy for me to find things, that was really what matters. So if you make this reading, like find things difficult, you are adding unnecessary risk to the revision effort.
Yeah, thank you. And
Yeah.
Dave Cantor, I know you're out there as well. Hopefully I'm not surprising you, but A, you had a question in the chat, and B, just maybe some last thoughts on this issue of emotion and reviewing.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, well, first, John, thank you so much for your thoughts. I learned a lot as well from your presentation. My comment was about sharing with the authors your background and expertise as a reviewer, so that the authors understand where you're coming from in terms of your thoughts and comments on their paper. Do you think that would be a good idea to share with the authors? I mean, if you have an expertise on the methods or on the subject matter of the paper?
I do, but I do that really in limited areas where I really feel like I am an expert. So if I get a paper and it's on ant colony optimization, something that I've actually coded in a computer, that's a method I did in my dissertation, I might say, hey, I'm very familiar with this technique. I recommend you go look at these particular articles. I try not to cite myself in that situation. I don't think that's professional, but I do tip off that, hey, I'm somebody that knows this method, and I don't see that you've talked to me about the how the pheromone coding works, and I don't see you talking to me about the global search aspects of that algorithm. And when I start saying those things, that author's going to know really quickly that I know his method, right? So vehicle routing and one or two methods, I might do that. but I don't say that I'm an expert on surveys just because I published a paper with a survey one time, right? I try to limit it to those 2 or 3. So yes, but only in certain situations.
Yeah, so that's awesome. And I know there are more questions coming in, and I apologize, but we have to let John Bell actually go back to his responsibilities and duties that he has as a new department chair. So thank you so much, John, for your insights. It was wonderful. Don't be surprised if I come back and ask you to do this again, because that is my nature. So
I know.
so thank you
Well,
so much.